Bulldog has its day. And with their huge wins over their rivals, Jim Harbaugh and Mike Gundy, they're some dogs. Trevor?
With 1 week to go, Sam, one of the most likely scenarios is Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. If you had those four in your preseason picks, I'm going to Vegas with you.
Trevor, you mentioned Michigan there, and the Big Ten better hope you're right, because if Michigan doesn't beat two-loss Iowa in the Big Ten Conference Championship, the Big Ten could be left out entirely. Kevin?
Well said, Heather. 16 schools have already fired head coaches, and surely there are more to come. But sometimes patience pays off. A year ago, they wanted Jim Harbaugh out in Ann Arbor. 1 year later, they're a win away from a Big Ten championship and a trip to the playoff. Patience sometimes. Meantime, Saturday, a huge power shift in the top 10. No game had bigger impact than the game where Michigan didn't just win and clinch a spot in the Big Ten championship and keep its playoff hopes alive and exercise demons. Trevor, they manhandled Ohio State.
They crushed Ohio State. They crushed their season goals in one afternoon of possibly winning the Big Ten and making the playoff. They crushed them physically and later in the game emotionally. I'm not saying that Ohio State quit. They did not. They played hard, but they were severely beaten down by this Wolverine rushing attack. And I'll tell you what, when they rushed the field after the game, the fans packed every inch of that field, and that was either one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see at that stadium or one of the most ridiculously thoughtless, because the players were out there amongst all those fans. And Michigan still has games to play. And on a day when Michigan State and Boston College had a bunch of players out with the flu, you don't want to be surrounding your players on the field, yelling at them, breathing on them, etc. So this was an outstanding moment. It was incredible. I just hope those Wolverines stay healthy enough to carry it into the next week.
5 touchdowns from Hassan Haskins. One of the great individual performances in the history of that game. Michigan, no question about it. There's the crowd. There's Jim Harbaugh basking in it all. The big win for the Wolverines. And you want to talk about dominance. 6 touchdowns allowed by that Ohio State defense. They failed to record a single tackle for loss since the 2016 Fiesta Bowl. Speaks to the dominance up front Michigan had and overall their dominance in the win. Elsewhere, weird things tend to happen in the Iron Bowl. We know this. And Heather, Alabama played uninspired ball for 59 minutes. Got to credit Auburn, but it looked like everything was slipping away, and then a miracle.
Kevin, uninspired is pretty kind. That was the most anemic offense that we've seen in regulation, probably under Nick Saban ever. But Bryce Young's 97-yard touchdown drive, he was spectacular late in the fourth quarter and in overtime when they needed it the most. My question, Kevin, is what does the selection committee do with Alabama this week? They dropped them after a loss for the first time last week against Arkansas. They showed more vulnerabilities this week. They could drop below Cincinnati. Are they still a top 4 team? When you look at what they've done offensively, Bryce Young is still very much in the Heisman conversation right now, if not leading it. But Alabama against Georgia, I don't know, Kevin. I think that could be one-sided, lopsided.
Look, the Tide remain a one-loss team. If you want to start picking apart their resume, there are some, if you want to say questionable wins, not necessarily convincing wins. Yesterday fits that category, but the big word is they win again, 24-22. So, Alabama will play Georgia in the SEC Championship next Saturday, Acho. The Dogs haven't played a game that's been closer than 3 scores since week 1.
And speaking of win again, the Georgia Bulldogs win again, convincingly 45-0 against their rival Georgia Tech. That's the 3rd largest shutout in series history, and they did it on the back of that man, Brock Bowers. He's a tight end, but he runs like a receiver. He's unbelievable. 40-inch vertical, runs a 4.4. Get him on my team. But speaking of that, next week, Alabama, SEC Championship. Alabama, week in and week out, has looked more and more susceptible to losses. Could this be a blowout again for Georgia? Only we shall see.
45-0 the final. We know no matter what happens next Saturday, Georgia is a lock to be in the playoff. Trevor, in the here and the now, based on what happened yesterday in Auburn as it relates to Alabama and their body of work this season, right now, in your mind, is Alabama a playoff team?
No. The defense is too inconsistent. They were phenomenal against Auburn, and they needed to be in order to set up that 97-yard touchdown drive to tie the game and send it to overtime that Heather talked about. But about every other week against conference opponents, that Alabama defense has been up and down and up and down. The Alabama offense is really a one-legged stool. It's all about Bryce Young and the passing game, because the rushing attack of Alabama still ranks 10th in the SEC in yards per game, and about that in yards per carry. So this is not right now a complete team. If they play on all cylinders, all together, all at the same time, the answer would be yes, but right now I don't trust them to do it.
Heather, for right now, Trevor says no. What do you say?
I say yes, because if you compare them with the other playoff contenders, which is what the selection committee is going to do, I personally have a hard time saying that Cincinnati is going to beat Alabama if they were to line up tomorrow. As vulnerable as Alabama has looked, they're still in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency heading into this week. And yes, while Bryce Young is shouldering the load and that running game struggled, I tell you what, if there's somebody who I want to shoulder the load, it's going to be him, because we saw what he was able to do, especially down the stretch in that game, and win it for them. That's what you want. You want somebody who could take the team on your shoulders and get the win, and he was able to do that. So when you line up Alabama against those other playoff contenders right now, I'm still sticking with the Tide.
And I still believe that winning matters, whether you're Alabama or Cincinnati. Winning still matters. And for me, Alabama is a playoff team. Whether they're 2 or 3, I don't know. I might put them at 4, but they found a way to win.
This much we know, the Tide control their destiny. They win the SEC championship they're in.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.